Sup, and welcome back to Abydos. Today we're going to be doing a brand new segment. This is going to be where I read a story. There's many different authors on the server that write different stories. So each week I'm going to read you one of the writings of a player. I'm going to start with something that I wrote, a bio for one of the oldest players I've ever played with. This was in Alexandria in 2014. So sit down, get yourself a cup of coffee or something. I don't if you do, or juice or whatever, and listen to the legend of Neworder59 and Tristan Ethan. This is a player bio that I wrote. Looks like December 17th, 2020. Neworder59 is one of the first players to ever join the server in 2014, and he left in 2015. He was a young kid who would add his buddy Tristan Ethan. Neworder left the server in 2015, but his diamond stash would remain hidden for 5 years. Neworder was someone the server host had met through the school he worked at. Neworder was always playing and talking about Minecraft. When he discovered Griever 2 had a world, he wanted to join. Alexandria was not running 24/7 then. In fact, when Neworder joined Alexandria, it was only a month or two old. He joined in the Stone Age, named such for all the buildings being made of stone at the time. The building skills Neworder had far surpassed the skills of Griever 2. So this is when I was kind of new to Minecraft as well, and all my buildings were square, cobblestone with these ugly glass windows. Like this is, people's builds in general. No, that's no excuse. People were building nice stuff because I know Neworder would watch tutorials and he was building really nice houses that were really nice. Neworder would build one of the most interesting bases on the server at the time and can be said to be Alexandria's first redstone technician. His base had a doorbell as well as a storage system involving rotating mine carts with chests. Neworder played very regularly on the server. At this time, it was usually just Griever 2 and Neworder. So when Neworder asked to invite his buddy Tristan Ethan to the server, Griever 2 agreed. Tristan would also prove to be a great member of the server. Since Alexandria was new and no long-term plans had been made yet, Griever would start accepting more friends of Neworder and Tristan. However, this is where things would begin to collapse. But for a long time, it was Griever 2, Tristan, and Neworder. Neworder and Tristan would both base together, with Tristan one-upping Neworder's doorbell, making his play Do You Want to Build a Snowman? They played together daily and helped with such tasks as the Spleef Arena and the Spawn Tower. Neworder and Tristan were also the players responsible for the villager... genocide. That word was supposed to be genocide. That saw the slaying of all villagers at the spawn map. This was like when I was too noobious to really even understand the gravity of the situation. You must understand that the map we played on was a 1,000 by 1,000 map. That's as big as the maps got back then, which now just sounds ridiculous. But back then was actually felt like quite a bit of space. So there wasn't one village, actually, there was two. There was a desert village that we ended up finding a little bit later, and then there was another one kind of on some hills, and he went there and they killed every single villager there just because they're kids and wanted to have fun and just, yeah. Villagers would never again populate the central village, even later in Alexandra's life. And what's funny is 6 years later, we still had the buildings there. The original villager houses in that spot where they slaughtered we never ended up like taking them down and rebuilding there. We built a lot of stuff at spawn, but those houses never ended up being moved. I think I probably didn't want them moved because it got to a point where they became historical. Neworder, I know eventually actually moved one of them to the museum in around 2020. In the late 2019, 2020-ish or whatever. Neworder would eventually play on the server long enough that players started to spread out. Griever 2 was working on the central map palace, and after helping with the project, Neworder decided to start a base across from the palace. Since we are going back to the very start of Alexandria, it's hard to pinpoint the full timeline, but around this time, Neworder and Tristan were adding new players that were also kids. These kids were followed and found to be stealing and griefing. These kids would continue to be watched as it was not what Griever wanted for the server. He closed the doors to new players at this time. Now, I'll stop story reading for a moment to explain. So these kids, I would follow them every time they would come in, and they'd just be wrist deep in chests and, breaking windows and stuff. And, it wasn't like they had the materials to start like nuking stuff every time they came in. But it was just, I used the dragon egg at the time to bait them too, because I'd always like hit the dragon egg or whatever and stuff. And if they did, then it just showed that there was not a level of respect that was going to be given. And, yeah, so they ended up, but there wasn't just Tristan Ethan at the time. At this time, I think I already had a couple other players. It's possible Zelda had already joined, Pseudo Brian had joined, Papa Loads may have even been in around this time, but it was kind of at a merge point. So yeah, New Order, Tristan began to join a friend on another server, but New Order stayed. Around this time, the server had 4 players. Oh, there you go. So it was around 4. There was a couple other players at the time. With Tristan gone, New Order would continue working on his new base, creating the first cobblestone generator, a wood house, a church, and the base was walled in cobblestone. He would never complete this base. New Order's story ends similar to others. His play began to slow down, and he eventually stopped playing. But unlike all players who leave the server, New Order left a secret behind. His stash of gear, diamonds, redstone, and quartz. No player ever left their belongings on the server before this or after this. His gear would remain on the central map, hidden until Griever2 began hunting for relics for the museum. So it's worth noting here, me saying that no player ever left their belongings on the server. Gear recovery is the rarest thing to get from a player who leaves a server. So we almost never recover tools or equipment owned by that player, which makes any equipment we do get from a player who's left incredibly valuable and incredibly collectible. So there's a few items like to give you an example, the last helmet that a player, part of the Ashen group that plays in the Nether, one of them had a netherite helmet left behind that was used as part of their wedding, and it went to auction and sold for 500 diamonds, so which is a considerable amount of diamonds on the server. So it was one of the highest selling items that had been to auction, so they're incredibly collectible. So we never really get it. Griever2 began hunting for relics for the museum, and the discovery of New Order's gear was an incredible find. And I don't even remember why I never thought to check for it sooner. But it wasn't until I was in the mentality mode of collecting up artifacts for this museum and trying to find what I found. And I found some really cool stuff in that journey. I found some really old books that were long since forgotten and things. And when I was at the spawn map, I was thinking about, I wonder if New Order's stash is still there. And it freaking was, which was absolutely ridiculous that nobody had found it. And his old base had actually been taken over by this one player, Pseudo Brian's sister, who took over. And she played on the server for 2 years at least. I'm going to say even closer to 4 years. I think she played from 2015. No, maybe about 3 years then. But anyway. And she never found that stash either. So it was a miracle that we found New Order's gear. The stash itself was a modest one. There was enchanted diamond armor, and it was poorly enchanted. It wasn't maxed out. There was around 40 diamonds, 23 redstone blocks, and a few stacks of quartz. There was no tools or any equipment like that. Griever found the stash as he recalled 5 years earlier where New Order stashed it. To find New Order's stash was a holy grail find. Not only had no old player stash had been discovered, but this stash survived 5 years on the most populated area without discovery. New Order's armor set is regarded as one of the most amazing discoveries ever. Of course, that's by me. But other people were still kind of fascinated that it was located, but not many players at the time. In fact, it's possible that nobody at that time even knew who New Order was, so they didn't have the attachment to the pieces of equipment that I did. Of all the artifacts that stood the test of time, New Order's gear is considered by some the greatest artifact in the Alexandria Museum. The emotions that Griever felt when uncovering them was overwhelming, and great pride was had in displaying them. As Gravier was fond of New Order, many attempts were made over the server's life to try and connect with him, to show him what had become of the world. He never got to see Alexandria in its height, and this was always regrettable. And this was sad, because I had him on my PlayStation friends list, and once every year or 2 years, I'd say, like, I would message him. Like, the server lasted 6 years, so maybe once a year I message him, because I maybe messaged him about 4 times. And he would never reply, so he had definitely moved on. But it was just weird, he never replied. And I do wish that he just came by to visit, because when he played, the map was 1000, 1000. But later on, as updates came out for the game and we got when the granite and all that was introduced, diorite, the map size went to 5000, 5000. And it just blew our world wide open. And so everyone kind of scattered and started building mega cities, kind of bigger cities, structures out. That's kind of where the north and south divide took place. And yeah, so it was definitely regrettable that he never came and got to see Alexandria at its later part, because he was there at its infancy, and he never got to even be there when the map size increased, let alone like in 2020 when it was aged quite a bit. But the final contact attempt was made when his gear was discovered. Knowing he would not reply, Gravier sent a message stating his gear would be immortalized in the museum in his honor. New Order will not soon be forgotten. And like, I definitely can say that, yeah, he won't be forgotten just by me. I think nobody playing at this point remembers this player but me, which is why it was important for me to immortalize him in this new server through his biography when I started writing player bios. I'm definitely going to read more player bios in the future, so if you're interested in players that have gone past, you'll definitely want to tune back in. And we actually have a graveyard of players. So players in the old server, we didn't keep track, so we didn't really have a way to keep track of. After a while, I just forgotten. There's people who had been forgotten. But in this server, we started a graveyard, so all players who go, they will get their own grave. So this way we can keep track of everybody that's come and gone. Obviously, you can tell the people that were held in higher regard get a little bit fancier of tombs than some other people who barely get a tomb at all or get a gravestone at all. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Remember to subscribe.